The views and opinions expressed by the Loft Party Podcast panel participants and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Good Times with Good People company, the host, or its sponsors.
It's not getting in.
Welcome everybody out there in podcast land. The Good Times with Good People company proudly presents the Loft Party Podcast, where it is always about good times, good people, and good talk. Now that you've received your invitation, the best way to let us know that you're in attendance is to download the party or become official by joining us on Facebook, subscribing on YouTube, iTunes Podcasts, or Google Play Podcasts. Good. Thanks for joining us. Grab a cocktail, light a cigar, or whatever you like to smoke. Share us with your friends, and make yourself at home. I'm your host and moderator, Rio, and let's introduce today's panel. All right, so everybody out there in podcast land, of course, I'm your host, Rio, and let me introduce today's panel. So I've got my returning champions, Chris O'Connor. He is the owner of Liquid 9 Entertainment and Investments, as well as having some interest in Rieger Whiskey and Office Works. I've got Big Dave Elliott. He's the owner of C&P Construction. Joining us later will be our own personal brain mass, Brian Massey, and sitting in a on and off again visitor to the podcast, but not to the Cigar Club, is Chris Kipp. He is in automation sales, and he's going to be joining us today on episode 57 of the Loft Party Podcast. It's not a tumor, but it doesn't matter because it's pre-existing. So, before we get started and get in too deep, let's play a quick party game. So, would you rather have a nice body and an ugly face, or a gorgeous face and an ugly body? I think last week I started with Jack, which puts it on you.
We'll edit that out last weekend, sorry.
So, would you rather have a nice face and an ugly body, or a gorgeous face and an ugly body?
So is the rule that you can't change either one, you're stuck that way permanently? Because it changes the answer.
I think you're right. I think it does change the answer. I'm going to say that is not a hard and fast rule. Like, if there's a way to change the ugly part that you don't like, then you should be able to jump.
But then I would take a gorgeous face and just try to hit the gym a bunch. But if you're stuck with an unattractive face and a rocking body, there's not a whole lot you can do.
This is true.
To help out. You know?
This is true. Wear a lot of hats and sunglasses and hope that you look cool.
Turn the lights off.
What do you think,
Well,
Big
since
Jack?
you put it that way, I have to go with you, If I'm allowed to have a good-looking face with a bad body and I go out there and work my ass off and put that thing back into shape, get a nice tan, next thing you know, bada bing, the girls like the thing, huh? That's all I'm saying.
As I predicted, we have just been joined by our personal brain mass, Brian Massey, and he may be somebody apropos to answer this question. Would you rather have a nice face and an ugly body, or an ugly face and a nice body?
I'm not sure why he is remotely apropos to answer this question.
I don't know. I mean,
He hits the gym quite a bit, that's all.
You do indeed.
I feel like if you have an ugly face, well, that's not true. You can do something about that if you have surgery. I was thinking, my initial thing was, well, if you have an ugly body, you can kind of work on that. But
That was my thought.
That's been the consensus so far.
I don't know. At the same time, I mean, everyone's seen that person on the street. They're like, they'd be a really good-looking person if they did something about everything below their face.
Below the neck.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The it factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm still gonna have to say then, go with a good-looking face because you can
get that gym up.
You know,
It's the easier option.
And just have a small medicine cabinet mirror.
There you go. Right.
That's all you see every morning is that gorgeous ass face. You have to kiss yourself every morning. Hey, gorgeous, how are you?
Limit the perspective.
There you go. So what do you think, Chris?
Oh, that's easy. Just like you said, stay with the face and work out the gym a little more often.
Yeah, and I'm going to join the choir with a resounding amen. Because one you can, both you can fix. One you can fix relatively cheaply, and so I'd rather have the thing I can fix cheaply.
I got to mention. So I've been watching. The trash television. Everyone knows trash television. But I've been watching British trash television recently because it's on YouTube, like high def, free. You don't have to pay for cable or anything. And there's a show called Super Size versus Super Skinny. And it's awesome. So they get, this is not going to sound awesome, but they get like really obese people and anorexic people, like all in a room. They pair them up. Each episode, they take a pairing and they swap diets for 2 days, like in what they call the feeding clinic. And it gets both sides to realize, oh my God, the giant person is like, because they keep a food diary before the show, like for several weeks or something, and then the show will prepare the food for the other person. And so they get to see all this food in front of the person who's anorexic or on their way to being anorexic. And then the other side is the person who basically doesn't hardly eat anything but drinks coffee. It's always coffee or tea that they're drinking.
Right.
And the large person, that's all they get.
That's all they get.
So both sides kind of get to see how ridiculous it is to put their own meals in front of someone.
Right, get a sandwich and a gallon of tea.
And then it's like, so it's British, so it's very smug. And every single episode they send.
Sorry out there, British podcasters, but you know.
I think
you know you kind of smug. Right, so let's just be real.
Every episode they take the overweight person and send them to America, and they're like, "This is your future." Every single
That's
episode.
horrible.
and they go meet someone who hasn't gotten out of bed in a while and has to have their family take care of them. And, they take them through their whole day, and they're like, "This is where you're headed." And, they interview the American person.
That's horrible.
My 600-pound life or whatever. Right?
Yeah, it's
I think I have a very good
It's
friend
kind of like
who worked on
Scrooge and the
show.
Christmas Ghostess, They're going to take you through and say, hey, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
And so
Right?
so it made me think of that. And there's some people on there you'd be a very attractive person, and if you got after the
If
other
you look
parts,
at this.
but if you go in and there's no hope for your face, then
You had better hope that you got some money.
I saw one of the funniest clips I've ever seen the other day, and it relates to this. And it was from either the late 50s or the early 60s, and it was talking about, kids being mean to other kids or whatever. And so there's this really good-looking group of girls, and this kind of unattractive girl walks in, and they're like, if you find yourself being bullied and unattractive, you should stop and ask yourself, what is it about me that I can do better?
Wow.
Wow.
it's legit. It was supposed to be
I swear to God, this is like a school film. It was for real. It was definitely from the late 50s, early 60s.
Wow.
That was the message.
That is horrible.
How about
What
stop
times
being
changed?
Times have changed.
That's crazy.
Thank God times have changed. Oof. All right.
They have, but at the same time, everybody feels compelled to fit in rather than being their own person. Until you're comfortable in your own skin in life, you're going to struggle, right? Who you are and what you are.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to be like you or be like you, right? When you're
Yeah.
Chris and I have a current friend that has that issue strongly.
not comfortable in his own skin. Never has been.
Yeah.
It's just to be inspired by people, but to not say I need to be just like.
Exactly.
There's a difference.
I would agree, but I do think that and I'm a firm believer, listen, come on, you can't let yourself get crazy out of control. I don't understand about everybody's mental issues, they can have a million of them and all those kinds of things, but at some point, there's reasonable shape, there's just reasonable looks, reasonably being cool, reasonably everything else. That's all you that's the bare minimum to me. It's when you start going crazy on one side.
On one side or the other.
No, I feel okay going that person is they've got to shed some, or something like that. I'm like, there's you only get to live once. I mean, you may as well try to do your best at it.
Now Mario, we go to the same gym, and you've seen some of the people in there that are like, way over the top. I mean, these people are in that. Which, I mean, maybe that's their thing that they like to go doing, but I feel like that's on the other end. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, because like to me, like you can sloth out or you can lunk out, and sometimes you go to the gym and you just like to say you see these dudes and you're like, come on.
And they got muscles on their eyelids.
I know, you're like,
you got muscles on your eyelids, you went too far.
Like, did you need those muscles to blink? Did you?
If you had to pick between the two, I mean, honestly,
sloughing out or lunking out. Yeah, I would suppose I'd rather lunk out if I had to. Yeah.
I'll tell you something interesting. In my trade, we've always had these guys show up, and they're all buff and everything, thinking they're badass. Be amazed at how many of those guys didn't make a day.
Oh, I believe.
See, that's what I was going.
Endurance.
Well, a lot of times they don't have. They have a lot of muscles, but they have no what I like to call practical strength. Like you can't do too much regular stuff, but I can deadlift 700 pounds. and whoever needs to deadlift 700 pounds, but I may need to put some sheetrock up one day, or I may need to walk a mile one day, or and
70 pounds 400 times.
Yeah.
We call it old man strength.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think those guys, and I shouldn't make a blanket statement like that either, because that's not fair. Because it's not everyone. But I think what happens with the majority is they start looking like this and everything, and it goes to their head. Because it's not honestly how they look. I don't care. But a lot of people that tend to look that way at this gym in particular seem like pricks. They just look around with this pissed off look on their face, and you better not go use the weight that they were using last. And,
and they're eyeing what you're lifting.
And they're they'll sit on the machine that they're using. They'll be on their phone, and you kind of come over try to just get a quick workout. I'm like, hey, can I use that? And, no, I'm using it. Back to his phone. All right.
I'm like, a little douchey.
There's some correlation there.
Sometimes you can get a couple of these cats that are a little douchey, to say the least.
This is not an endorsement, but I will say, one gym I really have enjoyed, out of sheer desperation, just because, so many companies are on a fixed budget now. But that Planet Fitness is pretty cool. They get everybody from pretty buff people to not in shape people at all, and they are absolutely mandatory about it. You don't judge anybody that walks in this place. You support everybody that comes in here. I kind of like that. This is the first time I've ever been in a gym that was like that.
Yeah, I love that concept.
It's like the commercials.
Yeah.
The commercials.
Commercials are great. And when you're in there, there's everybody's. It's a mixed bag, and everybody's cool.
Well, of course, I don't go to the gym. I swim.
Yeah.
Get to wear Speedo.
There you go.
The girls wear. When you swim, you have no pride. Because it is what it is. But you get a nice tan.
Okay.
To be fair, I wear a
So you just kind of, if it's hanging over a little bit or it's hanging a little low, you just got to walk out there with pride, keep your chin up, and get in the pool. Now, I'm a big boy. So when it comes time to get into the outside pool here in a couple of weeks, and that water's cold, all them zero-fat buck dudes I swim with, they're in there and their teeth are chattering so loud I can hear them from 10 paces away. I just walk by and rub the belly and I get in and I go, insulation.
I hear you.
I just think the fact that people are trying. I just admire that so much about people. If you know that you got something to work on and you work on it, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you just being able to master one's self. It doesn't mean that you need to, you don't need to lunk out, but knowing that, you're like you say, you
care of
know
it.
you know your issues and you're working on those.
Take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking care of your business.
You
Yeah.
fix the body because there's nothing we can do.
You don't
about your
take care of
face.
it, it's
Yeah.
going to come back to you.
You know
What
what?
was that?
I think that was the proper last words,
Right.
and I'm gonna let you say that one more time.
That's a good one.
Say you work on your body because there's nothing we can do about your face.
There we go. Hey, you can search for the Loft Party Podcast on iTunes Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and on our Good Times with Good People YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, tweet us on Twitter, and if you like the content we provide, donate to us on Patreon. www.patreon.com/Loft Party Podcast. You can find all of our links below. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. So I've got a pretty serious RIP this episode. Normally I do like celebrities or whatever that pass and do RIPs, but I would be remiss, to say the least, if I did not do this particular RIP because I knew this kid. I knew this kid from birth. Harry J. Davis. He is the son of actually a really good friend that I grew up with from childhood, and my daughter's mother. They want to get married and haven't had more children, and so this is their firstborn son, and he was killed early Saturday morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and over nothing. You know, it was, you know,
Chicago?
Yeah. He came in with 2 or 3 other guys that he knew. I don't know where they were coming in from, but it was like, you know, like I said, 4 o'clock in the morning, and when they got him in the apartment, they tried to rob him, and he wasn't going for it, and they shot him in the head for it. And so my quick diatribe, because I don't want to get into it too deep, but I do want to say, one, rest in peace, young Harry. I know that you're leaving behind a lot of people that love and care about you. 2, Chicago in particular, but everywhere in general, we've got to do something about the senseless violence that's happening in a lot of our cities, down to the, you know, individual that's, you know, that they're trying to rob on the street, all the way up to just a dude who loses his whole mind and goes into school and shoots it up. We're getting close to a point of fever pitch with this level of violence, and we've got to do something about it. I'm not going to claim to have all the answers at all, but what I will say is, you know, I was saying to Chris before the show started, you know, there's this movie, if you haven't seen it out there in podcast land, you should please go and rent it. It is subtitled, just a disclaimer, but it's actually, from a cinematography standpoint, it's an amazing movie. It's a movie called City of God. It's about a favela in Brazil that kind of gets taken over by these drug dealers, but the kind of there's 2 underlying stories. There's a kid who's talented. He's a photographer, and he just wants to live and get out of this favela whenever he can. And then the other underlying story is of the drug dealer that runs that crew, and he's an unattractive guy. He, you know, doesn't have much luck with women, and, you know, unless he's, you know, being forcible with them, you know. but what he sees around him is attractive guys that he feels are lesser men than him, that they're attractive, they're charismatic, they do well with women, and he does everything in his power to hurt or kill them and take advantage of the girls that they're dealing with. And so it's kind of a power struggle of the photographer wanting to get out and how they eventually can take back control of the favela from this drug dealer. And I immediately, as soon as I heard about this, immediately thought about City of God, because, like I say, I know this kid. I've known him since he was born. He was a really attractive kid, and I always, he's always pretty well dressed. He's always had some money in his pocket. Girls gravitate toward him just because, and it's just really a cautionary tale about not everybody is your friend, and unfortunately,
He might have been a little too trusting.
yeah, and so, I want to say, like I said, rest in peace to him and to his family. I am praying for you to get some peace and some understanding through this whole thing, because it's pretty horrific. No parent wants to bury
We
a
need to
child.
talk about that on some podcast because it's too deep of a subject.
Oh yeah,
With what the cartels are doing,
oh yeah.
and some of the things we can do to shut down the cartels and the drug traffic and things like that. It just, I don't even want to go into it because it is too deep of a subject.
Yeah,
It's a basic lack of respect for human life.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's also much deeper with it. This, most of, and you've said this, Rio, most of Chicago, this is drug fuel. This is gang territory.
Yeah,
Who's selling who's selling where, who's controlling what. A lot of it comes from that. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's like, it's like I said, I don't want to get too
Same
deep, but
thing
it's
here in
definitely,
Kansas City.
yeah, it's like, the horrible thing is really a poverty issue, because you get these neighborhoods where you get parents who are unemployed or underemployed, and then a lot of these cities used to have programs for youth to be able to do some kind of summer jobs or something like that, and a lot of the cities don't have the funding to do those anymore. So these kids are just out there on the streets having to kind of fend, and so with not the level of supervision maybe that they should have, on top of just poverty and everybody trying to get by, and you condensed that type of population into such a concentrated area, then you
Nothing but rubbing up against bad stuff every day.
every day. Yeah, and so
day.
and it's ugly, and it's ugly, and like I say, I have no solutions for it today, and we will definitely do a podcast on this particular subject, but I definitely wanted to extend that particular rest in peace. And okay, here we go. So first thing, Chris Rock, I saw he was on, I want to say, yeah, it was a Tonight Show. And he was talking about, he was side-splittingly just tears out your eyes, funny, even in that short amount of time that they're interviewing you on Tonight Show. But he did say something real profound, and he was saying that the Greeks used to say that they would not elect a famous person or even let a famous person run for office. And I thought about that in terms of our politics today, and I was thinking, with that, like a Donald Trump would never have been able to run, but it also would have affected Hilary, because she wouldn't have been able to run for a different reason. Because the other part of what he says, which I thought was hilarious, but super poignant, he said, why aren't elections at least held to the same standard as a radio station's contest rules. And I thought about that.
No relatives.
Yeah, and so I just randomly look on a radio station's contest rules, and it says, you got to be 18 years of older to play and a resident of the United States. No purchase necessary to enter or win. But any agents of the station or anybody, family members, anybody living in the same household are not eligible to participate. And of course, one prize per contestant, per contest period. And I thought that was pretty hilarious, but also pretty apropos because it got me to thinking about the fact that Trump and the Republicans in Congress just pushed through the American Health Care Act, at least through Congress. And it got me to thinking, if we excluded famous people, or people related to people who've already held office, at least same household related, who would have run? Would they have been any better? And would we now be starting all over again with healthcare? And so it just got me that question just posed in my mind. And then the anonymous female who can't be here on today's broadcast, but she sent me. We have these calendars, and hers is movie quotes because we both love movies, and sometimes I think some of those quotes are apropos to be titles of the podcast. And then mine actually is just these odd, fun questions, which is actually where I yank a lot of my party game questions from. So I guess with all that said, let's talk about the American Health Care Act. So the Republicans in Congress pushed it through with one vote to spare. And so now it's going to have to go through the Senate, which it will more than likely get, if not completely, almost completely rewritten. And then it'll have to go back through the House.
Let's go to conference.
Yeah, and
then it goes back to the House.
Yeah, right. So, as normally I start with Chris, but I think I'll start with the other Chris. and so, what do you think about the American Health Care Act? And well, first of all, do you know enough about what they pushed through?
I don't know the details. I felt like the Democratic Party pushed through. Obviously, the Clintons tried it in the 90s and didn't go through. Obama was able to get it through. And like anything that's done by the government, the intention is good, but the implementation is poor. And all of a sudden, we spent $800 million to cover a very small minority of people, and I think those people should have access to health care coverage, but at what burden to the rest of the system? So for dollars and cents sake, I'm a business guy. In 2001, when I was carrying a Blue Cross Blue Shield policy on me and my family, it was about $1,100 a month
For the family.
for the family in 2001 dollars.
So how many people in the family?
Family of 5,
Okay.
my wife
All right.
and 3 kids.
Okay, give some
Yeah,
dollar perspective.
Yeah, dollar perspective. And at that time, if I hadn't been an owner of the company, I couldn't afford to work there at that rate.
Just as a quick question,
Yeah.
without divulging too much,
Sure.
what were the rough ages that we're talking about amongst the 5?
Oh,
And
my
how
wife and I
old-
at that time would have been in
how
our
old was
40s, and the kids would have been teenagers to 10.
And boys versus girls?
2 boys, 1 girl. Just standard policy through the Builders Association here. I used to be in construction and stuff, and I carried some policies through them. But anyhow, so that's in those dollars and cents. And then fast forward, I ended up taking a job with a large company and getting really good benefits because we're a very small group of people, 15, 20 people, so it's hard, as Dave knows, to get good health coverage for a small group of people, cost effectively. And now those same healthcare costs are about $1,800 to $2,000 a month for just the two of us, just the wife and I. The kids are out of the equation. Luckily for me, my company pays about 80% of that. So my burden or cost is not as significant, but still a significant cost to the company to do business. And that's a pretty large company of about 3,200 employees. So you multiply that out, what's costing the cost of doing business. And I don't think there's any easy answers to that solution. I don't know enough about the current, what's being pushed through to commentate on it, but I think there need to be changes, but we need to see where that's going.
Chris? I was just saying. Other Chris?
I've always had a couple of things, because I've been in your position before, owning a business, and we paid 100% of everybody's health insurance. And rates that it rose every year, same trick every time. You get an insurance carrier calls you, they give you a great deal. Second year is probably about fair. Third year, you're jacked through the roof. It's about 20 to 25% annual increase, and then you have to go find another carrier and start the whole cycle over, and it gets a little ridiculous. What I would say is, on a side note, one, completely disagree with Chris Rock. If you did that, you would never have had John Quincy Adams as president, nor would you have had FDR as president. So I would not go for the famous person or family member clause. But aside from that, I've always said that the biggest thing that they need to do is mitigate risk. And this is what insurance companies want to do, is mitigate risk. So the larger the group you can be in, the better off you are. So this is where individual policies kill you. So when everybody's saying, okay, all these rates rose during Obamacare and yada yada, well, now there's all these individual people on there who can't group the risk together, and so it becomes insanely unaffordable for insurance companies. So why you see them pull out of states and get out of Obamacare
How the
altogether.
exchanges.
And so that's one. Secondly, the biggest two problems that insurance has in America is the inability to sell it interstate, which is just ridiculous to me. I mean, you have to sell interstate, you cannot sell interstate. So I've used this example 1,000 times. If you're an insurance company in Detroit and you can mitigate your risk by employing Salt Lake City and insuring them, well, all of a sudden your risk factors go way down. So you can afford to have cheaper rates, which is nice. It's a very heavy regulated industry already. And then I would say third is tort reform is a massive, massive, massive problem. And so people always throw out the percent. Well, it's only 2%. Well, no, that's the punitive damages that the insurance companies lost. What it doesn't count is the fact that they make you go see a primary care physician, then a specialist, and you go through this entire cycle. And I've told the story 1,000 times. My brother tore his ACL in Mexico, paid $2,000 cash, had it fixed up. The doctor told him, stay off your feet for 6 weeks and then start rehab. And he's like, it's a Mexican doctor. So he came back and went to his doctor, blah, blah, blah. They sent him all these specialists. $30,000 later in medical bills, they said, you know what you should do is stay off your feet for 6 weeks and then start rehab. And it's so stupid that it's beyond belief. We're just so scared of getting sued, that you just do test after test after test, and nobody wants the litigation and all those kinds of things. So those are enormous problems that were never addressed in Obamacare. The one thing that I fear the most about the way that they have the new bill is, yes, they left it in there that pre-existing conditions are covered, but they got rid of the caps on the increases that you can charge those people. So you can have cancer, and yes, somebody has to take you, but at a rate that you may never possibly be able to afford, which is the exact same as not having insurance at all. And so that to me becomes an enormous problem that needs to be addressed. So I don't know. Health insurance is a very tricky deal. I also know a lot of people who actually could afford health insurance and choose not to spend their money on health insurance. They choose to buy a boat or go on a trip or do any other things instead of spending the money on health insurance, especially younger Americans.
That goes particularly to the millennial generation.
That's what I'm saying.
They have did pretty well entirely kind of stayed off. They didn't have it through the business. They didn't want to go get it through Obamacare.
Well, so that to me was one of the biggest problems why rates were so high for such a long time is when you didn't have to have health insurance, kids were staying off of health insurance and not paying into a system, which they were the ones who cost the least. You know,
Lowest risk, lowest premiums.
oh my God, it's ridiculous. And then even beyond that, like to deny the difference between the fact that women go to the doctor more, they have, obviously, we have no risk of pregnancy here, but they have a very high risk of pregnancy, you know, up through a certain amount of time. That's an expensive policy to try to cover off on, which is why I asked the question about age and gender and this. All those things come into play. There's actuarial tables that just, these guys just sit there and figure out what the risk factor is and go from there. So it's a tricky issue, but I think if there was a good law, and again, you know, I'm not a lawmaker, so I don't know exactly how to write it, but I do know that in the insurance industry, being able to mitigate your risk means everything. And those are three things that you could very easily do to make healthcare far more affordable for people. Far more affordable. So it'd be interesting to see what this compromise bill, which I don't think has a chance in holy hell of passing, once it's all said and done, will look like.
What are you thinking, Big Dave?
I'm going to tackle this from a little different issue. Well, we've talked before on podcasts about how I have to handle my business. I agree with Chris in one thing in particular. In the construction industry, a lot of us are members of the National Home Builders Association, which is a large organization, and we pay a lot of PAC money to be able to go to lobby in Washington to help our interest. One of the interesting questionnaires that came across us recently was, you know, why do you think about group health insurance through the HB, you know, going through the whole thing? When we get into a larger group instead of a little company like mine trying to pick up health insurance for everybody. You know, my wife and I right now is $1,500 a month for our health insurance. She's 62, I'm 58. All right, so this is where it's gotten. This has gotten a little bit crazy. The political issue is that I think I've really been rather interested in watching the Democratic Party and Pelosi and some of those in particular that really pushed through, you know, the ACA. And I refuse to call it Obamacare. That isn't right. They shouldn't call it Trump care either. It was the ACA, and this is going to be whatever American Health Care.
That version of it's going to be
AHA.
Yeah.
And they really didn't crash Obama, you know, the ACA. They are working within somewhat of its confines. But the news medias that are slanted towards against Trump and anybody, Republicans, I should say Republicans, not even Trump, just Republicans, have come out and said it's pre-existing, they're going to kill everybody. The Democratic Party's been out there telling us we're going to kill everybody since 1995. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. On the pre-existing conditions, they aren't going away. They're going to put $8 billion into it, above the $130 billion they already have in it, okay? And in 20 years, they're going to add another $130 billion to it. So they're trying to get it to where they're kind of keeping it going so people that are having this policy already still have the ability to have this policy. Now, as you get older, you should have to pay more. And this is the thing, the younger people should have to pay less. So when we're telling younger people that you got to carry this weight to help the older people, I think they should pay what they need to pay. As you get older, you're going to have more risk, you're going to have more surgeries, you got more risk of things, you should be paying a little bit more. And what has to be understood by the American public is that you have to continually take care of yourself. We need to have serious wellness plans.
Wellness programs.
That motivate people that in the long term you have to do this. Because this house, if you get into this, which is what they tried to do with the ACA, but it really wasn't a well-written law. There was too many holes in it to be able to make people do this. You know, like my workers wouldn't take health insurance and they paid a $650 fine. Well, the next year they paid $1,000 tax, or whatever they call it. And it was doomed to fail. It was going to fail. And my interesting thought I had today was that the Democratic Party really didn't think that anybody else was going to get elected but them. And I really think in the long term they really want a single payer health system. That's what they were shooting for.
Yeah, honestly, I do believe that that's true. And I may be in the minority at this table. But honestly, I think until America's willing to take a serious look at single payer, we're going to continue to have these problems. If your system is based on people buying a product, people can always decide not to buy a product. But yes, other countries may have higher personal income taxes or whatever, but the trade-off is you get sick and you're a lower income person, you just go to the doctor. Now I think for America there's got to be a hybrid in the middle somewhere. There's got to be a single payer option for lower income, because I do think that anybody that's higher income and can afford to pay for your own healthcare issues probably could and should. Now, I know that that's unpopular with the insurance companies because they're going to lose a lot of people off their rolls, but I think everybody that's on their rolls will be customers that they could go ahead and they could charge a premium for, because these are the people that can actually afford it. I think what's going to happen, or what we're seeing happen, is that you get a lot of people who really just can't afford to pay for health insurance, but they also have a ton of medical issues that need to be addressed some kind of way. And and once again, I don't know if I have all the answers, but I don't see any law that mandates you buying a product being the solution.
And that's what the ACA had in it, is that you had to buy this product. Now,
Or those penalties.
that mandate was the biggest failure of it. Now, why couldn't we do this? And I mentioned this before. Why couldn't we set up a system? And here's where it also, everybody will say, look, this is a regressive tax. Even the poor folks got to pay some tax on it.
Yeah.
Everybody has to pay some tax on this. But we set up a basic health care plan as a single payer plan, and it gets you basic health care.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who choose to be more industrious or have better fortune, we're able to go out and get our insurance plans, our supplemental insurance plans, that allow us to get the health care that we want.
Yes.
And we can do it in groups. We can do it in a lot of these things. So now, haven't we created that hybrid plan you're talking about? It still allows America to be America. It allows American capitalism to be American capitalism.
Right.
And that's the one thing
we don't want to
never get away from.
We don't want to shoot. I mean, this is a capitalist society, and we're not going to be able to shoot capitalism in the foot. We're just not going to be able to.
It's a bad idea.
But, go ahead, Chris.
I know it's monster stuff, but let me throw one thing out. One, there's a reason you see Canadians coming to America for surgeries and not going to Canada.
Yeah.
Because it is a mess.
I do.
Despite Michael Moore's movie?
I do recognize that.
So what you don't want to do is kill the innovation that we do have in our medical system, which is pretty reasonable. What I do think is you need to start from the ground up and look at insurance, because people view insurance as going to the hospital, going to the emergency room, doing all these other things, when really you could probably set up, especially in today's day and age, and you're starting to see it happen a lot more often, is here's a telemedicine, where you can video Skype with a doctor and it costs you $50. Like, you really don't need to go to the emergency room for a cold most of the time. 75% of the crap that they see in emergency rooms could just be handled by these little minute clinics, but people insist on going
Pay for it. You can really pay for it yourself.
You know, there's a whole new way to look at insurance and say, really, let's address medical issues. Let's not address crap. I mean, crap is crap. Like, when you just have a cold and you run off to the emergency room, it should cost you a lot of money because you should have just gone to a minute clinic. That'd cost you $70. You know?
Yeah.
And that is part of a big academic and rethinking in this society and just saying, no, you don't always get to go to KU Med when something goes wrong. You can go to the KU Med clinic on Johnson Drive for $50 or $75 or whatever it is and get your cold medicine there, because that's probably all you need. And a lot of them have x-ray machines in them now and all that kind of stuff.
It's stitched up. I mean, all the
80% of the stuff people go to the doctor for, and it's super inexpensive, and honestly, it's barely more than your copay.
Or to go to the emergency room for something that small.
So, yeah, I mean,
You
I
know,
just think
where
it's silly.
you shouldn't be going to the emergency room. You need to go to an urgent care place.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Like,
then
yeah,
that's
like,
what
I
she
mean,
was
yeah, like you broke a bone or you've got, you know, something really serious that it's not the cold or flu.
They can set a bone in a minute clinic in a second. That's not very hard to do. They could also x-ray you and do all those kinds of things if you even have a broken bone.
But you get back to your tort reform and liability. So
But you're starting to see more and more of them pop up. And then I also
I use them all the time.
if you've been like watching some of the billboards pop up on I-35, I think it's St. Luke's that has a thing now where you can just Skype your doctor, you know, or FaceTime or whatever the case may be. And you go,
we have a wellness support program, Ask a Nurse program.
yeah, I mean, there's a million of them. If people would stay off of WebMD and actually go and just call somebody who knows what the hell,
Rather than trying to self-diagnose.
sure,
Yeah.
and then leave the real problems for the hospitals that really need the good doctors and that can take care of that stuff. Great. Sorry, Brian, go ahead. I didn't mean to
But,
cut.
yeah, as the millennial in the room,
We need the other opinion.
yeah.
First of all, I think that's great. I think that we shouldn't be looking at healthcare as just this one term of everything falls underneath it. It's like serious issues, maybe long-term issues, maybe all these things where, hey, I got strep throat, all this kind of thing. I know what it is. There's always the joke of WebMD, you go on there and you're most likely going to die in the next few days or
Right,
hours.
everything leads to death.
I
Oh,
was certain I had ALS. I was positive.
I don't know. It's a mess. I mean, just kind of hearing the conversation. I think it's true. If people aren't forced to, if you have the option to buy something or not, I mean, right? I mean, this has been part of our conversations all along. Is like millennials feel that they don't have money and they're not going to spend it on that. Like, I never get sick. Like, the last time I went to the doctor was 2 years ago, probably. I mean, I just probably go in for a checkup every once in a while, just because. But I don't get sick that often. If I do, it's just a head cold or something. I'm not too concerned.
Did you
about
go get a physical every 2 years?
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Well, I mean, that's why I was there last time. So
Well, I would do
See,
the
I think
same
that's
thing.
what's important.
And
That
this is another
young
question
people need to go get physicals
ties
also.
into what you're saying. How many millennials do you know that can't pick up their bar tab every weekend and also can't afford cable TV or apps or things like that?
right. So and that's where I was going
And
with
it's
this.
a choice of money.
At some point, I had a choice. Yes, I've been working for companies that have covered a lot of my healthcare costs, but at some point, I still have a choice. With I would go with the high deductible, and therefore, do I want to put money into my HSA? And I could say no, and I could go use that money to go to the bar. I probably couldn't buy a boat, but it'd be pretty cool if I could.
You'd be surprised.
And at some point, I said, no, you know what, this is important to me, because though I am not sick, and I do not get sick often, if that happens, I am in really big trouble, because there's no one to catch me. And so I wanted so I started putting money into an HSA, and having that ultimate goal to say, I want to have enough in there that I cover my maximum out of pocket. And now I'm in a much since I made that choice, it's been very good because I've been paying into it. And then a lot of times these companies will match whatever you pay into.
If you work for a good
So
enough
why
firm.
would I not do, And so I'm doing this, and it's just building over time. And every once in a while, I get something in the mail, like the quarter statement, saying, "Hey, I'm actually pretty close to my out-of-pocket max at some point." And now I get to keep that forever, or use it.
It doesn't go away. This rolls in. It is a savings account.
And that's what it should be.
And that's what it should be. And that's the interesting thing about HSA. So that's something I've always wanted to try to do through my business, where I don't have to go out and find a health care plan for my people. They have several options they can pick up, but I either put in. I'd love to be able to put in 75% of what their average health care costs into an HSA for each person. I think that would help me hire good people, retain good people.
Right.
All right, and then they pay 25%.
But that's how it started.
In
in the first
insurance,
place.
well,
It's kind
insurance
of
companies,
similar to what you did, and you guys were able to go on.
Because you're recruiting employees.
insurance companies want people to do that because that makes it cheaper for them. I believe. I think that's the
They
case.
actually
Because
get the full recoup of their money.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So
Wow.
and I noticed they've been.
Medicare and Medicaid, you're averaging about 28 cents on the dollar that you turn in.
Oh,
The key there is people manage their money
Right.
better than they would an insurance company's money. So if you have that HSA, you're going to be a little more judicious on what you go in
and that's
for.
the other thing. So you know what? This is a great example. So and now since I started all of that, I've gotten into a relationship, and it's much more serious now. And so now I'm starting to think, like I'm looking down this column, this single thing, and I'm starting to say, well, what would be the maximum out of pocket for a family someday down the road? Because that becomes part of that too, if I want it to be. And so now I can have a new goal to start working towards for someday when that happens.
And that's personal responsibility, and that's the one
Exactly.
thing that kind of has to go in here. And there, even people who have not as much fortune or a little poorer, you still need to try to understand. I may not have money to put into an HSA because I'm just trying to live every day.
Right.
But I need to be smart about what I'm buying at the grocery store. I need to get a salad and not a bunch of Twinkies and Cheetos.
And I want to answer your question, Chris. Is how many people do I know? Other than me, I would say probably 2 people that I know my age that do pay to an HSA. And I would say I could probably count on both hands the number of people I know that probably even know what an HSA is.
But how
So
many people do you
10%?
know that
Or
could
what do you think
afford?
Just hardly any.
How many do you know that could afford a basic catastrophic insurance policy that at your age that almost would never have to use it? The risk of them using it is so low, and they decide not to do it. I remember, and God bless her, I love her to death, one of my favorite people in the world, but my sister-in-law decided to fly out to Colorado all the time to see her boyfriend and get cable TV instead of putting money into buying insurance. She was like, insurance is way too unaffordable. Well, flying to Colorado twice a month seemed affordable. And that kind of stuff, and going out with your friends, that's affordable. It's just, it really is a matter of where you want to spend your money sometimes. And I would not discount Dave's point at all that this is a very unhealthy country. And we do a lot of things to encourage unhealthiness in poor lifestyle choices. And then we're surprised when we get hit with these catastrophic illnesses and go, oh my God, it's going to bankrupt me. Well, yeah, it's going to. You've been living like an ale for a long time.
I got a quick story. This is a friend of Chris and I's, and it has to do with dental work. He has very bad teeth. He chews tobacco. And he comes in, he says, lost another tooth the other day. And I looked at him and I said, when's the last time you went to a dentist? Oh, about 20 years ago. All right. So it's going to cost you $30,000 to get your teeth fixed, and you're bitching about it, right? Well, yeah. I said, so you haven't been to a dentist in 20 years. So if you've been going to the dentist every year and doing what you're supposed to do and had some crowns and then all this stuff, over 20 years, how much money would you have probably spent? Somewhere $15,000
$20,000
to $20,000. So you could have spent $15,000 to $20,000 taking care of your teeth, gotten everything straightened out, and your old bald ugly head would look decent with a head of teeth in it. And you might be getting laid, which he isn't anymore. Or you can pay at the end. So that's some Americans in a nutshell right there. They don't take care of themselves, and then when it comes to the end, they go, "This isn't fair. This isn't fair." Well, you should have done the basics at least.
I don't disagree, but I will say that I am baffled that dental and vision are not covered under basic insurance policies. I just think that
Michelle and I have to carry ours separate.
We have a separate policy.
You know,
percentages and they're a bunch of garbage, and the way they work out is.
I have long-term health that we carried from UNB, and we were able to, fortunately it was portable. We're still paying all our long-term health. Michelle and I believe in staying pretty heavily insured. To be able to cover things that'll happen to you.
So I go to Mexico, it's $40 for a cleaning, and then I'll give you a fill-in for another $25, and you're done, and you walk out of there and give the dude $100 and walk away.
I think the unhealthy habits are kind of a twofold reason. One is, I think it starts off with
people that smoke cigars and drink too much.
I would say it starts off with a little bit of a lack of education, in the sense that, I remember growing up and we were eating Eggo waffles for half our meals, and drown that stuff in sugar like syrup, right? That's not good for you. And
it tastes good, damn it.
It tastes good. So you kind of get, and I don't want, it's not fair to, maybe it is fair to blame my parents, but it's so funny. My mom comes up here every once in a while, and the thing, almost every time she does, she's like, I didn't realize how bad these things were for you growing up, and I would have, not done that. Okay, so whatever happened in the past is what it is. But I think people get, I don't think that that's an isolated example. I think that happens.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I think when it's, I guess taking the side of the substantially underemployed. Yeah, I think that let's say you get a small family of 3 or 4, and money's just extremely tight.
Every dollar goes to living every day.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand that too very well.
So the types of choices that you make at that point, are, do we make sure we have something to eat, or do we, with this $150 that we have to spend on groceries for the 4 of us, or do we put toward, a health savings plan, and I think most people say, well, I need to put food on the table, and I think the bigger problem isn't that you need to put food on the table, because obviously you do, but I think to your point, it's you've got to say, okay, look, I'm not going to buy, because I see people do it all the time,
Fried food all the time.
Yeah, it's always fried, or always fast food, or if they eat at home, it's
sometimes it's McDonald's.
It's
time again.
Or a ton of sodas and stuff that you.
I agree with that, and so I think that we get into a habit, but I guarantee almost anyone you talk to that's at any of our ages know that all those things are bad for you. At some point, it's not an education thing. Maybe it was when you were younger, but at some point you learn, at least now in the way that things are. And so that happens, but I think what you got into a habit. Like, people get into habits of, it's so easy. It's so easy to go across the street right here and go grab some Jimmy John's, right? A bag of chips. Do I want a cookie with that? Yes. Go look that up. That cookie has as many calories in it as that sandwich.
Oh, absolutely.
It's and it's good. And that's the thing is, after the whole, you get into a habit, it becomes really hard. It's bad for you, but it's really hard to say, I'm not going to eat those bad things because they're delicious.
Sugar and salt are more addicting than any drug that you can take.
Today I swim, good exercise. I go to Jimmy John's, I get a nice salad, a little cup of pozole verde soup. By God, I'm going to have that ice cream cone on the way out every time. You cannot stop yourself from going back and get that ice cream cone.
I have one more question, because this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time since you brought it up. You're a family of 4 or 5. Did you have the budget for 4 or 5? You know, I mean, is there no life planning that goes into saying, I'm just going to do what I can afford? Kids are freaking expensive.
We'll buy a house I can afford.
There's a million
We'll save money to buy a
choices
car.
that go into it, you know, and you know.
But they have to be educated to do that, and I think that's the main problem, Mario, is that they don't have the examples to teach them that this is how you need to live.
I'll tell you, I don't buy
I think
that at all.
I think it's a tough situation for a lot of folks that they haven't been taught that discipline. They don't have a lot of discipline in their lives. A lot of them.
I'll throw
I've got
it. For
experience.
example, my brother went to the University of Michigan. I may have told this before. And his major, he was one of 13 people with a World Health Organization major, where they went around large pharmaceutical companies, paid them to go to Africa and set up these AIDS clinics and do all this other kind of stuff. And as Americans, I think there's this big notion of, well, AIDS is such an enormous problem in Africa because they don't know about it, they're uneducated about it, and so just teach them how it is spread and how to control, change behavior and everything. They knew more about HIV and AIDS down there than we do in America by a mile and a half. It was just that the culture was so male-dominated, and they weren't about to change their culture. That's how it was spread. It wasn't just ignorance. It was just they chose to take the risk. Yeah. And at some point, you're like, okay, I mean, I definitely feel bad for anybody with HIV and AIDS. I'm not defending that at all. I am saying it's not just a matter of education. At some point, education lets you know what you should and shouldn't do. If you're 20 and you're still eating Eggos, that's a problem. You know not to eat Eggos at 20. Like, come on, everybody knows that. It is a matter of just making the choice to not do it. And at some point, that's got to think. And I agree with you with patterns, but patterns can be broken, especially if you know what the hell the risks are. Then break the pattern. It's just got to happen at some point.
All right, so we're going to be right back because we're going to pay a couple bills. Hey out there in podcast land, we would not be doing our duty if we didn't acknowledge the sponsors of the Loft Party Podcast, the Majestic Restaurant and Jazz Club, and the Majestic's Pendergast Club. The Majestic carries on Kansas City's tradition of great food and jazz. Let them show you why they are the classic Kansas City steakhouse experience. 931 Broadway, just 3 blocks from the Kansas City Convention Center. J. Rieger and Company, a Kansas City distillery. Whether whiskey, gin, or vodka, neat or on the rocks, J. Rieger, Kansas City, sipping good since 1887. C&P Construction, Kansas City's premier wood framers, 50 years of quality framing and craftsmanship. Just email david.cnpservice@gmail.com and start building something new today. And our friend and frequent guest, Lane Boland. Thank you all for all that you do. Time to rejoin the conversation. Okay, so we're back, and we are talking about healthcare. We originally started talking about the American Health Care Act, but we've kind of gotten into a conversation about the American public and just kind of the responsibility issue, and this is something that I struggle with only because, growing up, I've known a lot of families that, they just had to do whatever they had to do, and but I do agree with everybody on the table that at a certain point, there does become a level of personal responsibility that you have to take on in order to just take care of yourself in the world. I mean, it
also leads to your success.
Well, absolutely. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier about do you want, an ugly face and a great body, or a great body and an ugly face? At the end of the day, I think we all agreed you can work on your body, and not just going to work out, but it's what you put in your body. It's what you choose to fuel this machine with.
I agree with you. It's about success, but I don't know that it's fair to talk about that at this table because everyone that's sitting here is very self-driven. Like, they're going to go get it done. And there is a large portion of the population that are not like that. I mean, I used to date someone that was just wanted to get that job, maybe even before out of college, and just as long as it paid the bills, was fine with that until they retired.
Yeah.
And, my brother, all he wanted to do was become a PE teacher. Like, he wanted to get that. And I know he loves that job, but he's like, once I do that, basically, I don't have to do anything the rest of my life. And I thought that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Like, I want to keep going and have that next goal, but
That's just a personality thing, because you're going to have leaders and followers.
Right.
You have to realize that there are people that are motivated and they're likely to become successful, and they'll hire people. And I got people who work for me that are just happy to work for the company.
Yeah.
And they want to be paid as much as I can pay them, and I want to pay them as much as I can pay them. They don't want to go run a company.
Yeah.
They have no desire for this. They just want to go do their 8 hours every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
And that's okay.
Look, there's talking about America in general. I remember years ago hearing, I was hearing kind of a debate about something similar to what we're talking about, and everybody kind of had a very heady and academic response. And one guy was like, "Look, with all due respect, everything that all of you just said was bullshit, because Americans, by and large, they want their cable TV, they want their sports, and they want to grab McDonald's or whatever their fast food choice is on the way home, and they want to sit down in front of the TV at night and let whatever's happening to their body just happen, because, like you said, they don't have that level of ambition, and I don't know if, and I dare to think that it's probably not an education issue. I think it's a motivation issue.
We've gotten lazy as Americans.
Yes.
And we're having trouble with our workforce and hiring people because they don't want to go out and do hard work anymore.
Yeah, I'm not.
So this is a thing that's evolved in our society from when you take them back in the 1800s, early 1900s, and everything on. Those people had to work. Everybody
I don't believe that at all, and I'm sorry. Like, I honestly, if you believe, look around at the number of Fortune 5 companies right now that were started by 20-year-olds that are employing 20-year-olds that are busting their ass and working all the time.
immigrants.
Or like Brian is like working all the time, trying to make it work. There's a hell of a lot of young people out there who are trying to make it work. I don't think it's just a lazy generation by any stretch. In fact, I think it's been a very innovative generation. What I do think is that people ignore the fact that there's consequences to everything. We sit around here and go, well, being successful is incredibly great. Generally, we mean financially successful. Is what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I know exactly where you're going.
Of its own shit. I mean, my dad made a lot of money. I never saw him ever. I never saw him. So he made the choice to go work hard, thinking he was going to family. Never saw him. That's a consequence for him. We had a terrible relationship for a long time. There's a penalty for everything you do and a reward for everything you do. So you get a lifestyle choice. If you're a PE teacher and you feel rewarded, and that's great, and that's awesome, you'd probably be home with your kids a lot more, and you hang out at their games and all that kind of stuff. Well, for me, I would never be able to do that. I mean, I would skip my kid's soccer game in a second. God forbid she ever plays soccer. I know she does not, because I do not want to go to those games. But, I know that Saturday and Sundays are my work days. That's when I go in, and nobody bothers me, and I work almost all the day. And the penalty for that's going to be probably she's going to feel slighted and have resentment and all these other things. There's penalties and rewards for every single thing you do. And so it's just a matter of, like, I'm not willing to take anybody's penalties as to the same degree that I wouldn't let anybody take my rewards. Like, forget it. Like, I'm not pushing that stuff off on other people. You're your own person. Make up your own mind. If lifestyle means that much to you, which it does to a lot of millennials, great. But there are also a hell of a lot of millennials that are busting their ass all the time, starting huge companies, and employing millions of people, to be perfectly honest. And I don't think it's a generational thing. I really just think people make decisions on their own personality.
Yeah, and I don't know if I think it's generational either. I do think it really does come down to the choices that you. It's kind of funny. You always grow up hearing that phrase. Money changes people. And I have personally never believed that phrase. I've always felt that money doesn't change you, money amplifies you. So if you were a douche, but you were a broke douche, and you had no opportunity to be a douchebag, because you had to be humble because you just didn't have the money to be mean to people if you wanted to. If you suddenly get some money, you will become what you are. And by virtue, okay, perfect example. Talking about health. I think we would all agree that Oprah is super rich. Being super rich, there's plenty of things that she can afford. One, she could afford a chef. She could afford personal trainers. And there were stints in her life that she really tried with those things. But overall, it boiled down to she just liked to eat. and she made the choice to go ahead and eat. And so that now at 60-something, she's, all over Weight Watchers, trying to get control of it. So I definitely don't think it's generational. I think finding your personal point of motivation is and I don't know if I think the overall problem with Americans is that there's a vast lack of personal motivation for a lot of things.
I would have to say that if you believe that theory, and I'd be willing to go along with it for a little bit, I do think that to a certain degree money can amplify your douchebagness and all those kinds of things. But in order to believe that, you would have to believe the corollary too, which is lack of money and letting yourself devolve into poverty or not having money and those things also amplifies a really shitty side of your personality too, where you start to look to take things, I think, from people that have it and you don't want to work for it or whatever.
I believe,
Neither one of them.
Yeah,
is good.
I do believe that. And I do believe that. I think
you also don't have to be rich to be successful.
Oh, absolutely not.
See, and that's one thing that's hard to get by.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
some people may live in a little house and have a couple kids and might lead a very good life, a very happy life.
Really happy and all that. To Chris's point, there's plenty of people who are broke and they find every way to swindle and hustle and steal from everybody around them who is also broke. And then there's plenty of broke people who just, they just keep their heads down and try to, get to work every day and try to make it, I don't think that money makes you a douche, nor do I think that being poor makes you an asshole. But I do think having plenty of money and you have the propensity to be a douchebag will make you a big one, or having no money and the propensity to be a douchebag will make you a big one. Hey, you having a good time? Let me introduce you to a couple of my media brothers. First, www.americathemixtape.com, a cipher on American politics, society, and culture. And where'd I get that mixtape? Of course, www.cornerbodega.us, purveyors of urban culture. Come on, let's get back to the party. I remember having a conversation with somebody about Justin Bieber and when he was going through all of his stuff, and they were like, oh, he's such an ass and da da da, and I remember saying, okay, so let me ask you a question. If you were 20 and you had $100 million, and every adult works for you, would you be a nice person? And of course,
wants something of your pie.
And so everybody's answer was, of course I would be a better person. And I was like, first of all, fuck you, you're a liar. You would be an asshole. I know you. I was like, you're 3 seconds from an asshole now. I said, but I also know that there are other people that they would be amazingly altruistic, and they would give to all kind of charities, and they would do everything that they could do. And Saturday, me and the anonymous female, her brother is a pastor at a Methodist church, and so he had this grand idea, and he got together with several other churches in the Northland, and he wanted to do a day where they packed 100,000 meals. Of course, I'm thinking that's not possible. But he found this program where they pack these just like these plastic bags. They kind of look like the bags like you get like a large bag of like granola, and so we went up there and we wound up volunteering for like an hour and a half, and they were working in hour shifts. So long story short, each bag, it looks like you can make it into some kind of a soup or something like that. But each bag was 8 meals. At the end of the day, they wound up packing 105,000 meals. Wow. But getting to your point, he's not a rich man. He doesn't even have a rich church.
But he did something very rich.
And exactly. So it's the choices that you make and how you intend or plan to use what you do have. Growing up,
You have more gifts than just your money.
Oh,
Time.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. But my mom, she's always really health conscious. She's always gone to the gym, and she always made sure that we had, not just food in the house, but good food in the house to eat, and and at least until I was 11, it was just the two of us. And and so I learned that it really was about the choices, because she didn't, she probably at the time didn't make $30,000, but she found a way to, keep, healthy food in the house. She found a way to pay tuition for me to go to private school, all of the above, and we made it work. And
Those bags of 8 meals?
yeah,
I was poor once myself.
oh yeah,
It's amazing how much 5 pounds of red beans and 5 pounds of white rice with some Cajun seasoning can make it last for a little while.
for a little while,
You can eat a long time on that
eat a
stuff.
long time.
It
on
gets
that.
old, but you can eat it.
Yeah.
I would say this about the whole money thing. I've seen it go both ways. I mean, I did grow up with money, and it was nice, and then lost all of it, and then had to work your way back. So now I appreciate it.
Right.
To have some successful businesses that are running well. Still live in the same $100,000 house with my paid off Jeep from 2007, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because I appreciate where it was, and I don't ever want to go back there.
Right.
So you try to be cool to people and help out. Dave, I know you've done a lot of same, trying to help out people. Brian, I think you're on the verge of becoming very successful because you work so hard, and I think that you'll be the kind of guy who appreciates it.
Smarter than the rest of us, too.
I know you'd scratch and claw for everything that you do. It's not that. Chris, I don't know you well enough to know.
No strife, no strife.
Yes, I mean, and which is great. I mean, it's just, it's really a matter of your person. But then how many lottery winners that lived in trailer parks lost everything later because they were a bunch of assholes and,
See, it's exactly what I'm saying.
It is literally just an individual choice on what you're going to do and where you come from. Sometimes you appreciate it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't know what
Look
you're
at the
gonna do.
numbers of sports personalities that made a crap load of money and then were broke 10 years after they got out. It's still, they made bad choices.
It's choice. Life's 90% what happens. And 10% how you react to it, and 10% what happens to you. You can always choose it half full or half empty, and you may not have necessarily more money if you measure your success that way, but I think you have a successful life, good family life, good relationships.
And that would be a lifestyle value. And for me, I've always valued money over lifestyle because I believe, in an odd way, if I can earn enough, that provides a great lifestyle to whoever I want to be around, and that's what you make money for. Money for money's sake is just stupid. But there are a lot of professional athletes who have made it and took advantage of that opportunity. Ron Sherry with the Anheuser-Busch franchise, Eddie Kinnison's killing it, Joe Montana's killing it, all for making smart choices and getting an opportunity to do something with the money that they got, and they appreciated it. There's also been a bunch of others, like a Van Morris or a Tamir Vandover, who got a ton of money and just squandered it.
You can make the same argument about a lot of college athletes. I've seen some of them go through there at KU while I was there. They got their masters completely paid all the way through. Got 5 years completely paid for. They were smart. They had full ride scholarships either through basketball or football or some other sport. But the majority, unfortunately, we kind of just blow it off and just barely make it.
All right, and we'll be right back after a couple messages. All right, so after this break, then we'll start wrapping up.
Viva la resistance.
All right. So we've talked about the American Health Care Act. We've talked about kind of personal responsibilities and being broke out here versus having a little money, and the difference that choice makes. And the last thing I definitely want to touch on was kind of the public's response to the American Health Care Act in a section that I call the public reaction, aka resist. So I want to start that off by kind of quickly going through some of the things that were actually in the American Health Care bill. One, the bill's no longer going to require people to buy insurance through the affordable health care marketplaces. if they want, there's going to be some federal tax credits, but it would eliminate the tax penalty for failing to buy health care. And with those tax credits, you're going to go from about $2,000 a year for a person in their 20s to about $4,000 or so a year for people that are in their 60s. So there's definitely going to be some raise in costs, and I think we've got some kind of split thoughts on kind of the impact on that raise in cost, and I'm not sure. Like I say, if we've definitely got at least today, if we've got the answers on that.
Having said that, do you have a figure that affects what it would do to affect the deficit?
Well, yeah, actually, let me go to the next one, and then that because that'll start kind of touching on it. So some of the tax cuts that were in the Affordable Health Care Act, this bill is going to eliminate those. And those cuts added up to about $592 billion, and so that's definitely going to have some effect on the deficit. Definitely, there's going to be, which they haven't really detailed yet, but they were saying that there's definitely going to be some dramatic, is the wording used, changes to Medicaid. Still want to wait to see what
That's an alarming one.
what that looks like.
That's a scary one.
Yeah, that's the scary one.
Yeah, that's a real scary one.
Yeah.
What's your reference here?
This came from a piece on NPR that I was looking at.
But everything has to go through the CBO, so that's generally where they come up with the numbers.
Exactly.
In the first place.
So with pre-existing conditions, there's still going to allow pre-existing conditions, but they're also going to allow the states some leeway on how
That they can opt out.
they
They eliminated the caps.
Yeah.
They eliminated the caps of unreasonable raises.
Exactly. So that's the other piece that kind of scares me, is that now you're not denied health care, but we can dramatically raise your insurance rates, and for a lot of people, that's going to be the thing that's going to mean that they can't have health care. They just won't be able to afford it.
And to be perfectly fair, that was already in place before the HCA went into effect anyway.
Yeah.
You could not be denied under pre-existing conditions. You just had to pay unreasonable rates to get it.
Which is the same thing.
We just went back to the same crap.
Based on your income level.
Right. So with the state waivers, older people can be charged more than 5 times what they charge young people for the same policy. 2, it's going to eliminate required coverage called essential health benefits. That's going to include maternity care, mental health care, and some stuff with prescription drugs as well.
Right. That's already covered under Medicare Part D.
Right. And 3, it's going to change for or deny coverage to people that have pre-existing conditions such as cancer, diabetes, or arthritis. Once again, I don't think they're going to be denying anybody, but that raise in their rate is definitely going to be...
Yeah, the language is such that you can't deny,
Right.
but you can set the rate at what you feel is fair market value for that.
And lastly, this CBO. The CBO's report concluded that over 10 years, possibly 24 million fewer people will be covered under this bill, and that's going to obviously raise it. Well, the interesting thing is it's saying that 24 million fewer people will be covered, but it's saying that that the analysis of the House's bill could cut deficits by $337 million over the same 10 years. I'm not
just by getting people off the
getting people off the road.
Because you know who's going to drop it? It's just young people.
Yeah. I mean, young people, look.
Is there a penalty for not having the mandatory minimum insurance?
No, that's been
that's been eliminated
It's
too.
been eliminated. It's just, hey, you have to have minimum insurance, but if you don't, then
Exactly.
We get it.
So,
But the Senate's going to rewrite this too, so it'd be interesting to see what they turn around and throw into it.
yeah. I mean, it definitely gave me pause when I was hearing about some of the things that were going to be happening or being eliminated. But knowing that the Senate's going to rewrite this thing and then it's got to go back to the House, I just don't see how it passes.
Well, here's the question. How many votes did it fail by the first time? 24?
Yes.
I believe it was 24 votes that it failed by the first time.
Right, and
And
it
they got
and
23
it passed.
back
It
somehow.
passed with one extra vote.
Right, so they
This
got
time.
23 back.
Yeah.
So the question to me is, what did those 23 people see in this new bill that all of a sudden made them think, this is a really good
This is a
bill,
good idea
and
now.
we should do this. It seems more like what I guess in a political strategy you would say, okay, I'll go ahead for the first time and vote for it because I got a couple of concessions in there. I know the Senate's going to rewrite it. It's never going to pass the second time, but I can tell every constituent I had that I voted for healthcare reform and yada, and just the Senate killed it. I mean,
That's and that's kind of where I'm feeling that it's gonna go.
Well, well, let me ask you this then. So, let's say it does go there and they don't pass it.
Yeah.
Do we go back to the ACA?
Well, I think we go back to the law that's on the books.
So you go back to the law on the books where there are currently, Michelle and I had to get individual health care right now. Blue Cross Blue Shield was it. And the insurance companies they're thrown out of it. So,
Aetna just pulled out of Virginia.
yeah, they're pulling out of it. They're pulling out of it. These insurance companies are losing money on this deal. And they're complicit in it because they thought they were going to make
Well,
money.
they were going to kill it.
All right, they were actually in on that, and then so they kind of getting what they deserve. But if the ACA does crash,
right.
then where are we? That's my point. They're trying to do something. And the interesting thing about the Republican Party that's different than the Democratic Party is that they have divisions in themselves.
Yes.
The Democrats tend to walk lockstep. And
I think all opposition parties tend to walk in lockstep. You remember the Republicans voted as a bloc a lot of times to do things, and Democrats have divisions of their own. Think of the Bernie Sanders faction versus the Hillary faction.
Bernie's been saying some interesting things recently about some of the resistance movements and
There's a
things
lot
like
of
that.
them.
I've actually been surprised at some of the things he said.
There's a lot of them. It'll be interesting. It's going to have to go back to HCA, so there's no doubt that is the ruling law of the land. You can't pass another law that supersedes it. You're done. You can try to put an executive order, but it'll be struck down as being unconstitutional.
the executive
that'll
order
be
is
done
not a
because
solution to
it
the
already
problem.
went to the Supreme Court, and it was passed. And it was passed by a Republican Supreme Court justice who passed it as a tax. So that was the legal loophole they got through that John Roberts cast a deciding vote on.
But he really knew what he was doing by doing that, too.
Well, for a Republican Supreme Court justice who is very conservative, this is why I like him as a dude. He just went by the Constitution of the United States and said that this was passed as a tax.
And that's
You
his
guys,
job.
You stupid Republicans should have rewritten it in a different way. But the way that it's written is constitutional. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. What I do think they're going to have to do is the three things I said before. They'll have to do tort reform. They're going to have to let people do interstate commerce at some point. And they're going to have to let people mitigate risk by forming larger groups that are across state lines. And then that will be, I think, the next step. And that is inching closer to a single-payer system. Because the larger you make the groups and the more interstate they are, the more consolidation you'll see.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to end up with a handful of people.
It's lower risk. The numbers average out.
That's it. It's just, it's the actuarial tables, and that's what you need to get down to. that's just like, I mean, you're a data guy.
Yep.
I mean, my God, just run the data and see what it costs to insure these people. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, with big numbers, it works every time.
There you go.
Yep.
All right. I think with all that said, I think we're at the point where I end this podcast in the way I end our podcast. And that is, to good times with good people.